I think we're live.
Yeah, let's test this out.
All right.
Yeah, there it goes.
I'm seeing the feed, so this is promising.
This is awesome. So can someone comment in the comments to say that they can hear us?
Yeah, it looks like we have a slight delay.
Yeah, there's going to be a delay.
Yep.
So we'll start in 1 minute.
Hi, Whitney. How's it going? Good. Good. Okay, I don't see it doing video switching, but as long as my audio is coming through, I think we're okay.
Oh, there we go. Should be doing video switching now.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Oh, there you go. Okay, I just saw it. We'll get used to this. All right. It is 7 o'clock. Should we get started?
Yeah, let's get started.
Let's do this. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the inaugural Frontend League Kickoff. I guess for as far as introductions go, I guess I'll start with myself. So my name is Ben Hong. I'm one of the lead UI developers at Politico. As far as a little bit about me, I'm a self-taught developer with a background in psychology, so no classical computer training whatsoever. Sort of taught myself since back in the day of like, GeoCities and those sort of things. And yeah, really excited to be here.
Yeah, so my name is Jacob Schatz. I'm a staff developer at GitLab, which is a open source Git repository, full dev lifecycle platform, and we're doing a new startup called Meltano, which is very exciting. And I also do not have any classical computer science training whatsoever, but I did read a lot of books. And when I started, there was no Stack Overflow, and just really worked at it hard to get to where I am. So let's talk about the problem that we're trying to solve with Frontend League. So Ben and I got together and we were talking about this, and we were like, yeah, the front end development itself is kind of hard. It's not just table layouts and simple CSS and design requests. There's a million different things that you supposedly have to learn. And even just Googling it turns into information overload. It's completely insane. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to help developers navigate the front-end ecosystem. So Ben, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So some of the things we'd like to bring to the community are like workshops on requested topics, helping to provide like recommended guides, articles that we've sort of weeded out from all the noise that's out there. Because obviously with the internet, everyone has an opinion about what sort of blogs and what you should be doing, but we can help from our experience and from, at a high level, what are best practices, what are the things you should be listening for and considering when, building your own and making, advancing in your own developer journey. And so, and just like guided paths as well for learning certain specialties. So if you're like, I really want to become like an SVG expert, helping you to sort of navigate that territory as well.
Yeah, and we're also going to be, actually guiding you through learning these things. So we're going to figure out what workshops would be requested, things that you want to learn about, and then we're going to teach them. And so we're going to help people who are in our position to actually learn the stuff that we learned when we were getting started. So also helping people become conference speakers. I do a lot of conference speaking. I'm flying to Sao Paulo at the end of the month, and I got 3 other conferences after that. And definitely wasn't something that was just, instantaneous for me, and would love to get other developers speaking at conferences and providing guidance on how to become an expert developer. How do you get to those higher level positions? How do you master the interview? All those sorts of things. So Ben and I both interview tons of developers, and we definitely know how to interview people. So
yeah, and in addition to what Jacob brought up, we also want to provide opportunities for the community to obviously give us feedback and to also contribute as well. So we also run, so I myself run another meetup, UDC, and so we like to also give opportunities to people who also want to give, have opportunities to practice speaking, and to also help, if they have workshops and stuff they want to do, we want to help grow people in their careers as well, so that if your goal is to become a community leader within the front end community, I'm helping you to achieve that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're trying to figure out, and we're looking for what you want us to talk about. What we obviously have, the front end topic is such a huge, enormous topic, and we want to find out what are the most important things. What are the things that you want to find out about? What do you want to learn? What do you want to get out of this? And so we're definitely taking notes. And if anybody has any suggested topics that they want, just put them in the comments and we will respond. And also any questions that you have, just put them in the chat and we'll respond to those as well. We'll do that right now. But yeah, some of the topics that we're planning on talking about in the future, which next week we have an in-person meetup where we're going to talk about navigating the front-end ecosystem, and just talking about how the whole front-end ecosystem is made up of so many different things. You've got builds, and you've got CSS and HTML and JavaScript, and then you want to know about backend and how to write Node and all these different things. And trying to navigate all of that stuff, it can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess in the meantime, we'll cover over some other topics that we'll be planning to talk about. But if you guys have any questions for us in the meantime, feel free to jot them down in the chat, and we'll be sure to respond to them. And so to build on top of that, we'd also like to give basic primers for people who are new to front-end development. So whether it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript workshops. In addition, we'd also like to, for those who have already gotten past the basics but looking for more guidance as far as CSS architecture decisions, how do we handle larger code bases, design systems, even things such as getting good at Git, which is something that we often take for granted. And hopefully in the future, we'd also like to host hackathons as well to give people opportunities to practice and apply those skills. So those are things you can absolutely look forward to.
So Fuley707 is saying, are you guys going to talk a lot about WordPress and themes such as Oceans WP? And I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong here, I could be completely insane. But I think one of the things that we're going to focus on is things more related to overall front-end development as a whole. WordPress, I kind of think of as something like a PHP thing. But, if you follow along and you go along with us, writing a WordPress theme can be something that's very, very simple. And the details behind it and the strategies you would use to create a WordPress theme, even if you don't know anything about WordPress, is something that you can easily do if you learn, the basics of front-end development in general. Obviously, you also have to know some PHP and stuff like that. And we're probably not going to be talking about PHP as much as we're talking about JavaScript. Probably we won't talk about PHP at all, actually. But yeah.
Yeah, and to continue on that, so definitely there's interest in WordPress and theming as a whole. Obviously, one of the big things that's popular within the front-end community right now is opening up WordPress APIs so that we can use Vue to be the rendering engine. So I could totally see us at some point giving a more advanced workshop or talk on sort of how those two are connected. And so for those that are interested in those sort of things, those would be kind of the areas we want to focus on as far as helping people to kind of stay up to date for those sort of things.
Yeah, but WordPress themes, look, WordPress is like my old bread and butter. I mean, I used to do so much WordPress work. It's insane. Well, I used to work at GE, and we used to make all the WordPress blogs for all the executives at GE, and that was one of my earlier jobs. Whitney is saying, I'm a backend developer interested in learning front end, looking for resources. So that's perfect. Yeah, this is like exactly what we're going for here, is that it's difficult to find resources. And when you look up stuff, it's just completely overwhelming. And it's, you know, so that's definitely something we want to help you out with. And if you want to tell us stuff that you would be interested in learning, or like what direction in general you kind of want to go, then we probably could point you in the right direction. Saloni, I know, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, says, I'm looking for ideas to build my portfolio, pick projects from GitHub, stay up to date with happenings on the front end technologies, stuff like that. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's exactly the thing. So we can definitely help you build your portfolio and figure out what are the stuff to work on from GitHub. A lot of the stuff that I work on at GitLab is, you know, we do a lot of Vue.js work, and we used to do a lot of jQuery work. But a lot of the things that we do right now is just like finding the boring solutions and then just going with that and sticking with that, and then becoming like a Vue expert or becoming a JavaScript expert. And kind of like once you become a JavaScript expert, then you can really do anything you want, like picking up a new framework or anything like that. Once you have the basic building blocks of you know, of JavaScript and HTML and CSS, you know, looking at something from GitHub is really no big deal at all. So, for example, right now I'm preparing for a talk that I'm doing in Sao Paulo in Brazil for the Vue.js conference there, and part of it is that we're going through like how Vuex actually works. So I go into the source code for Vuex, and I'm looking at the source code of Vuex, and I'm saying like, okay, how does this thing actually work? And, you know, because of, you know, the time that I've spent learning JavaScript, it's something that I can, actually grok. It's something that I can understand.
Yeah, and to expand on that, to I believe Solani's question, we definitely will plan on actually having either like whether it's a newsletter or at least somewhere on, we'll have like a website up for you that you can check to see sort of what articles we're recommending and things to keep track of. And we're also looking for feedback from the community always, as far as like if there's something we can tailor towards you. So if there's like a subgroup that's really interested in animation, we should, you know, help to make sure we tailor certain recommendations as far as animation, newsletters to follow, and those sort of things. And we'll definitely have more ideas in the pipeline for helping people with their portfolios and those sort of things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Arthur is saying, what's the most interesting front end thing that you've each recently learned? I could definitely tell you the most interesting thing that I've recently learned is that I've been, well, a couple of things that I've recently learned. So just last week I was talking on the Vue.js podcast, and Chris Fritz was talking about D3 and how like he can easily just spin up a chart and kind of do whatever he wants with D3. And D3 is one of those things that I just never got around to learning. And so I've recently been deep diving into D3, and it is just like absolutely fantastic. It is just the coolest thing ever. And then the other thing is that, like I said, I've been recently, you know, deep diving into the source code of Vue.js. Like one of those JavaScript things that is like, you know, a known hard problem to solve is called deep cloning of objects. And in the Vuex source code, there's this function called deep clone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to read this thing because here's like the answer to that problem. If you look it up on Stack Overflow, how to deep clone an object, there's like a million answers, and everybody's like, it's not possible. Right?
And so to answer my side of that question, I think my most interesting thing right now, I'm big on helping to document things for teams. So if you haven't heard, Evan Yu from Vue.js came out with a site called VuePress, which essentially allows you to assemble markdown files, but you can also use Vue components in it as well. So it's a pretty exciting piece of technology that's sort of deep diving, and I'll also be giving a talk on that as well in Atlanta and Toronto, in case anyone's at Connect Tech or Vue Toronto.
What is a reprographer? Is that how you say that?
I don't know what a reprographer is.
DCowboy61, you should tell me what that is.
Yes. But to 8-bit Van's question, just don't want to skip over, we will definitely be trying to live stream and record the events whenever we have them. And so this way they'll be uploaded to the channel. And then at the bare minimum, yes, we'll want to make sure we keep the site updated as well with notes and those sort of things. Think of it like a podcast summary. We'd like to keep that available for the community for those that aren't able to make it.
Yeah. And Hunter Jennings is looking for overall help with some of the core front-end technologies and career advice. That's definitely something that we're going to be talking about extensively, for sure. And you go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I think Jacob mentioned. So him and I both have interviewed a ton of people who, you know, on paper, a lot of people can claim. I think one of the hardest things about front end is that you can claim to have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but when it comes to actually either getting in the door or proving yourself, you know, that there's a whole a lot of things we'd love to share with the community is helping people enter the door, and not to mention from there, how do you grow yourself in the career? How do you make yourself valuable at the you know team you're at? And those sort of things. So those are definitely really important topics that are near and dear to you know both of us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing because both of us have interviewed a ton of people, and when you have a company that's looking for front end developers, that's a really popular company. Often you get a lot of people that apply, but that shouldn't scare you away. Instead, you should just become really, really fantastic at JavaScript, because even though a ton of people apply, often, just to be completely honest with you, a lot of people just aren't. JavaScript is a difficult language, and a lot of people find it very difficult. I don't think it's a difficult language. I think it's just a very different language. But if you become really, really good at JavaScript and HTML and CSS, just like those core technologies, forgetting about all the fancy other things like Vue and React and all the like latest keyword soup things. As somebody else was saying on here, keyword soup. Yes, keyword soup. If you just become really good at those core things, you are such a valuable person. So a lot of times what companies will do is, if you know just core JavaScript and they're hiring for somebody that needs to know React, and you say, I don't know React, but I know core JavaScript really well, they'll just hire you. They don't care if you know React at all, but if you know really, really, really solid JavaScript, they will hire you without you knowing React, because they know that you'll be able to learn it in like 2 seconds, because the whole, you know, ecosystem is part of something that you already are familiar with.
And to expand on that, I know that there are also a lot of people who JavaScript might not really be their bread and butter. And so if you're more of a UX UI designer, but who happens to be really solid at HTML and CSS, knowing your CSS architecture or knowing how to use HTML in an accessible way and provide those sort of consultation things, those are also key things that you could also become a specialist in. And so I think a lot of times we talk a lot about JavaScript, but I've seen plenty of people who have made successful careers at front end just being like HTML, CSS specialists with like animations and those sort of things. So just things to keep in mind. And so, yeah, we'll definitely be covering more of those things as time goes on.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting thing. There's this role that's kind of coming out now that you see more often. I know a couple of people that do this, which is the role of like a front-end developer that knows UX really well. And they're this bridge between the two roles. And so it's really, really helpful to hire someone who knows front-end development really well, but might not be like a super JavaScript ninja, but can definitely has the eye for design and can do CSS and HTML like really, really well. That middle ground there is like super duper valuable. It's a super duper valuable thing. And people will, be busting down your doors to hire somebody like that. That's for sure. So, Tatiana is saying, what technology should a beginner developer learn first? jQuery, Java.
I'm interested in what your answer is. I might have a controversial one.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I know exactly what mine is, that you should stay away from jQuery uh, until you know JavaScript. Because, well, especially now, like it used to be that like back when I was starting, it was like we were developing for like IE6, which is Internet Explorer 6. And if you don't know, like IE6 was a miserable browser to write any code for because it was super unpredictable, it was super buggy, and you couldn't get anything to work at all. So that's like kind of where jQuery came out of. It was like the miserable situation as a JavaScript developer that you were put in from all these browser inconsistencies. And jQuery really solved all of that for you. Like it just solved all of the things. And now browsers are so much better than they were before that like you kind of don't need jQuery. You kind of still do, but you kind of don't. So like if you just learn like, and actually the current like ecosystem of JavaScript, like just raw JavaScript that browsers support, is kind of built around the problems that jQuery was solving in the past. So now, like, JavaScript as it stands in its native form is really, really good. So you should definitely, this is my opinion. Ben, I would love to know like what you think about this, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so so I agree with everything that Jacob said. As someone who, as a kid, tried to learn JavaScript and thought I needed to know Java, I had a kind of a mixed history with JavaScript growing up and like failed numerous times trying to learn it. And I will say, I think the one advantage to actually, so my advice actually is to do one of those like Codecademy jQuery tutorials, because jQuery is so prevalent right now in so many like legacy code bases that you should at least get, like, it helps you to get exposed to like the core of what JavaScript does, which is like selecting elements on the page, manipulating them, and with like simple like phrases like add class and to sort of like conventionalize some things. So spending like a couple hours to expose yourself at least to get a sense of JavaScript. I think the jQuery piece, that way in the future when you work on legacy pieces, you're not like, I've never worked with jQuery before. But beyond that, I think Jacob's right. Like once jQuery, you've gotten comfortable with jQuery, you understand what JavaScript is supposed to do, then absolutely dive into vanilla JavaScript, because jQuery, I think it'll have done its role beyond that. But I think it's good. It's a good intro into what JavaScript does, because it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes at first.
Yeah, and it's like the same thing when you say like, should I learn Vue, JS, or React, or JavaScript first, or Angular first? And like this is a crazy thing, and I don't even know if I should say this because maybe this is like too deep, dark of a secret from the interviewer's perspective. I think I've interviewed like over 1,000 people for front end positions at this point, and so I can say like just from my data points, this is just my data points, that anytime that I interview someone that knows Angular, a lot of times for some reason, I don't know why, and I'm not busting on Angular, for some reason, their core JavaScript was really poor. And so I think what happens is that like Angular was just so easy to learn that people just didn't learn JavaScript at all. So and so I think the most important thing is to get those core JavaScript things, and then when you go to look at Vue or Angular or React, it's like super easy.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. That's
yeah,
totally
fair.
Let's see.
TypeScript.
Yeah, that's a good question.
TypeScript. So TypeScript is fantastic. TypeScript is another thing that's like solving a lot of the problems that JavaScript like has. Like JavaScript doesn't have strict typing, if you know what that is, or if you don't, that's okay. We'll explain it later. But TypeScript kind of solves a lot of those problems. Now, me personally, like, I don't think that you need TypeScript, but it does kind of like make a lot of things really, really easy. But don't forget that in the end, the browsers can only speak JavaScript. Like they can only speak JavaScript. That's the only thing they know how to speak. So TypeScript has to compile down into JavaScript. Like that's the only way it can possibly work. So if you're learning TypeScript, then you're learning a compiled language. If you're learning JavaScript, you're learning the language of the browser. And right now, the browsers speak like a very specific dialect of JavaScript, which is called ES5. And so even when you're writing like the new ES6 stuff, you probably still have to like have that be compiled down into ES5 so that it's like, works on some of those weird browsers that don't support it yet, because ES6 is not like completely compatible with all the things. I'd love, yeah.
Yeah.
You say something. Sorry.
Sure.
Talking too much.
No, I think Jacob. I think I agree with a lot of his points. I think for me, TypeScript. I think it does bring a lot of good things to the JavaScript arena as far as typing. I think the main thing, especially if you haven't used it before or you're bringing it into a team, is that really the team needs to buy into it as a whole. And sometimes, whether like I know at my team, we have so much legacy code base that we could probably do small parts in TypeScript, but we're not ready to like be like make everything TypeScript because it can be a fair amount of work to actually make everything backwards compatible. So it's just one of the things if that's something you're suggesting to your team, just make sure it's not like that's one thing I don't like about Angular is that it's dogmatic about your use of TypeScript, whereas like a framework like Vue gives you the option to opt in whenever you're ready. So it's just one of those things where I think it's good for the ecosystem, but choose it as a weapon that's best suited to certain projects and teams.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing is that like you're gonna see this thing that happens if you become like a senior level person and you're kind of in charge of decision making. And I'm not saying this happens in my company. This is just stuff that I've seen like over the past like 10 years or whatever it's been, is that like someone will come and they'll say, we need to rewrite everything in TypeScript because TypeScript is fantastic. And the thing you got to do is like you got to avoid rewrites, even if TypeScript is fantastic. You just got to like avoid rewrites because rewrites are extremely expensive and often don't work. So when you say TypeScript, it's like, well, for who, right? It's like, well, not for us right now because our whole code base is in JavaScript. And if we were to take it on, would we start rewriting everything in TypeScript and then only have some things compiling TypeScript and some things compiling JavaScript? So like, again, it's like a boring solutions thing where that's what the, what you got to use. A D Cowboy 61 says, I use Adobe Creative Suite CC for front end and back end code.
Interesting.
Oh, for front end and back end code using Rails and PHP. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never used Adobe Creative Suite CC. I would love to know what you think of it. I used to use
Dreamweaver.
Well, CS5. No, CS3 I think I started with. Like Adobe Suite CS3 was the first one that I got, which like had Flash. Yeah. And I used to write a lot of ActionScript. Like a ton of, when I look at TypeScript, I think, oh my gosh, that's like ActionScript. I loved ActionScript. It was a good language. You might hate Flash, but ActionScript was a fantastic language. So Hunter.
All right, Hunter, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Hunter has, it would be nice to get some advice on how to break out of tutorial land and find, beginner, intermediate dev. This is definitely a topic near and dear to me personally. So I'm actually working on, I guess I'll announce it. So I'm working on a project actually called Framework Workbook. And so it's sort of this concept of helping to teach people not only like frameworks or even vanilla JavaScript, but to build sort of more advanced projects that take you just out of that tutorial realm and maybe help give people also more ideas to build more concepts of their own. So that's, and then we're also, Jacob and I are brainstorming other ways to help people get from that beginner to intermediate. But I know this is a big like missing piece of the learning puzzle for a lot of people.
Yeah, we have some really big ideas and we're definitely going to talk about them soon. For that. And what projects have gotten you excited about? So especially from the lens of someone who's interviewed candidates, what projects have gotten you excited about a candidate? It's not for me, just for me. Sorry, you want to talk?
No, you first.
Okay. So for me, when I look at a candidate, it's not the projects that they've done. Usually it's just like, you start asking them questions about their like experiences in JavaScript. One, you just look for a person that has a good head on their shoulders. You look for a person that's like, you're talking to them and you're having a really great back and forth. And almost like that people value. And I know not everybody interviews well and you have to take that into consideration, but that people value of like finding someone that's really like a good communicator because they have to work with everybody else, that's like 60% of it. And then when you're talking to them about JavaScript is, are you guys on the same page? Are you folks on the same page? And, when you ask them typical JavaScript questions, you don't want to quiz people and ask them very specific, like coding interview questions, like, what when is this undefined and stuff like that, because that's like super specific, and JavaScript is, front end is such a huge ecosystem that they can't possibly know that. But like if the general conversation just shows you that their knowledge of JavaScript is broad and they've done stuff that that shows that they've done a lot of broad areas and covered a lot of ground in JavaScript, and you ask them about it and they know what you're talking about and you know what they're talking about, it's almost like you're looking for like a buddy to work with. You know, I'm not looking for someone to be under me. I'm looking for someone to work with me. So that's like the biggest. I don't know, Hunter, if that answers your question like specifically enough. But it's not usually the projects specifically that I look for. It's more like the common understanding that I look for, and you can usually get that out of someone. And if I see that someone's super nervous and they don't handle interviews well, I'll ask them to like code something up for me. I'll make up a topic. We have a couple of topics that we generally choose from, and but usually that's only to like confirm my suspicions that someone is already really awesome.
Yeah, so from our end at Politico, so yeah, to Jacob's point, there's usually not necessarily a specific project. I mean, don't get me wrong, when someone has their portfolio, it does help to see if they have something running on like Heroku that's talking to like an API, and to see the level of commits that, how deep they gone, and looking at code quality. But usually, as far as types of project, it usually ends up boiling down to people's enthusiasm. So we've had a recent candidate who could really speak to why a particular project was very exciting for him and what it meant to him. And so to Jacob's point, a lot of times the projects are usually just meant as a way to find out more about your work style, and whether you've worked with people, other people or not. Because to Jacob's point, a lot of times when you're on a team, the hardest problems to solve are actually people problems. They're not actually code problems. We, as a team, we solve things together, and there are obviously plenty of Stack Overflow posts to help us with the code problem. But knowing that we have some, that we're going to work with someone who has a good head on their shoulder and who can, handle things when things get stressful, when stakeholders confront them with conflict, like those are the biggest things that we look for as far as like hiring practices. So
yeah, absolutely. And Arthur, sorry, Whitney says, what blogs, e-magazines and sites do we read? So honestly, I just have like I just work a lot, and I don't tend to read a whole lot of stuff. Usually in the morning, I'll just like go check Twitter.
Twitter's great.
Yeah, usually whatever is the latest thing usually floats its way up to Twitter, and it gets repeated a lot. And then I just read Hacker News. But Hacker News, man, it is an addictive site. It is a horribly addictive site. So yeah, but I read a lot of Hacker News. I read a lot of Twitter and stuff like that. And you follow Sarah Drasner and
Sarah Drasner, she's
amazing. Sarah Drasner,
West Boss, so many people out there. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, so for me, I agree. Twitter is actually a great. I know some people don't like Twitter for some of the controversies that have occurred, but like a lot of the web dev community is on there. So following like Dan Abramov from React, all the Vue.js core contributors are very active on Twitter. So just kind of getting those superstars. So we can help compile a list for people who are maybe just starting out on Twitter. I probably would recommend creating a Twitter that's like just for your coding stuff, that's separate from your personal. It's usually easier to keep those two things separate. But as far as blogs, emags, I would definitely recommend Smashing Magazine. That one covers a lot of different things in addition to like UX topics. And so I get a bunch of newsletters as well. And so we'll compile that list afterwards, and we'll post it so that people can follow those as well. So there's a lot like JavaScript Weekly, there's a Front-End Focus Weekly, Vue.js. Podcasts are actually a fantastic way to keep up with the front-end community as well. There's one in particular called Front-End Happy Hour, where essentially a group of Netflix engineers and other Silicon engineers get together and choose like a keyword. Like if talking about frameworks, it might be like JavaScript. And every time someone says JavaScript, they have to take a drink. And so it's like over the course of an hour. And it's a pretty fantastic listen. And so they talk about different things. And so that particular podcast is really interesting because you get to hear them solve problems at a scale that I think a lot of us don't get to solve at. So whether they're talking about like international translation issues as far as like using certain types of hero images and what that implications are from like a cultural perspective, it's actually really interesting to hear those things. So definitely would recommend. We'll come out with a list of podcasts for you guys to check out too. So hopefully that helps to answer Whitney's question at a high
Yeah.
level.
And the other thing I would say, this is like a really, really important thing to know is that like all these people that you look at on Twitter and then those really like popular people on Twitter, you should find the ones that are in your area and you should go like get a coffee with them, go invite them out to coffee.
Yep.
They will totally do it and you can go talk to them and have like the most awesome time. There's no shame in being a beginner or or any level that you're at or even not just getting started. Like people want to talk to other people and everybody is just looking to get to know other people. So that's what I've done. I'm going to go speak at that conference and I've got like a couple of coffee chats set up in Sao Paulo, and I'm like really excited about that just because I want to go get to talk to these people. So you should totally do that, and they will do it.
And to Jacob's point, one of the things I love so much about the front-end community is that they're so open and they want to connect and they're happy to talk to people. So going to conferences and being able to speak with speakers directly and have dinner with them, like I can't tell you, that was just like a mind-blowing realization for me, that like just to know that like these people I've looked up to for so long were just, again, they're just happy to engage with you and answer questions.
Like they really, really want to do that.
Yeah,
like,
they really do.
Like, it doesn't matter if they have 90,000 followers on Twitter. If you
Yep.
send them a message, they will totally go out to dinner with you. So
I don't know about dinner, but
okay, so they'll definitely something. You can chit chat with them.
Yeah, that you definitely could.
Yeah, anyway.
What else?
Arthur says, coming from someone who learned JavaScript back when it was ES4 and no one called it ECMAScript, please learn vanilla JavaScript before any library or any framework. Absolutely,
Yeah.
totally agree with you. DCowboy61 says the science and practice, reproducing documents and graphic material. I was the original Photoshop. Oh, before Photoshop. Oh, wow. That is super cool.
That's really cool.
That's absolutely amazing. Wow. That's really cool. And I didn't know the name for that. So that's awesome. Yeah. So
okay,
we have so much to talk about and we're super excited about all this. And the next meetup is going to be in person. Ben,
it's September, I believe. Just check. Yeah, so it'll be on September 12th. And so we're going to bring the meetup to the Columbia, Maryland area. So if you check out our page on meetup.com, I'll post it in the chat. This will make sure you can keep up to date with the latest from us.
And this particular meetup was just like a get to know you, kind of tell you how everything's going to go down. They're going to start to get like actually focused on specific topics. They will not be just, it'll be open to questions and all that stuff, but we're going to start, focus on getting you learning stuff and actually making a difference here, if that makes sense.
Yep. And one exciting thing for those that have, taken the time to join us live, I posted, it's not letting me. Okay, I'll send out a message later to the people who attended this, but we're actually setting up a Discord channel. And for those who don't know what Discord is, it's basically like Slack, where you have like open channels. And so we want to invite people to join the Slack community, the Discord community. So if you have questions, as you go along, that we can, help to answer them, in between the meetup times, and just to serve as a resource to the community. So be on the lookout for that invite coming out soon.
Yeah, awesome. And does anybody else have any other questions before we head out until we see you next time? If anybody has any other questions, feel free to post them in the chat. There are no wrong questions or bad questions. Totally happy to talk about absolutely anything at all. We can give it another minute or so.
Yeah, just for the delay.
Yeah, just for the delay. That's right. But yeah, just to tell you some of the stuff that I'm working on, currently working on a lot of graphing stuff right now with Chart.js. I was going to use D3, but right now I'm using Chart.js just because it made it super, super easy, and we're doing all this data science stuff.
So let's say Hunter has a question.
Yeah, Hunter.
Yep. So he says that he comes from a business and agency background. Do you see that as having the knowledge, potential differentiating point for the candidate? So in my experience, I found that front-end developers often come from many walks of life. So absolutely, having your own unique background can definitely give its own perspective as far as what you can contribute to the team. So I definitely, I would not see that as a negative at all. I don't know about you, Jacob, but
Business, so a business and agency background is super, super. So like the two different types of, well, I mean, there's a million different types, but two different types of things is you're talking about either you're working on a product or you're consulting. You know, in general, you can kind of break it down into those two different areas. And the people who have done consulting, who have like sweated bullets and tried to beat deadlines, when they go to do product stuff, they are so freaking good. They're so valuable
Mhm.
because they're just really good at doing deadlines and you know all that sort of stuff. And having a business background makes you like a fantastic manager because managers not only have to manage people, but they also have to manage deadlines. And while some people are thinking about the latest greatest framework, and you're thinking about like how can we make money from this, you know that's a super super important skill to have. So absolutely I feel like any like I have my degree is in piano performance, and I feel like that has so much applicability. It's I don't know if that's a word, but applicability towards this you know area. Like it's like so many different things that you just your background has a huge um it can really expand your valuability your value I guess is the word.
And just to add one more point to that, yeah, I definitely would say that, again, so much of what we do is about working with people. And so we see a lot of people who come out of boot camps who all they've done is code their own little personal projects, and then that's it. And so that's a little bit of a red flag for us. I'll speak for myself, because it means that I'm not sure if you've actually worked with other people before or how you deal with personality conflict and those sort of things. So to your point, to Jacob's point, if you come from business and agency, like that's great because I know that you've worked with a lot of different people, and that means that it's just a matter of getting you up to speed on coding stuff, which is again I have never any trouble with.
And yeah, absolutely. 8-Bit Van says, is this a group that's good for absolute beginners? I've done some
Oh
HTML.
yes.
This is the group for absolute beginners, and people who are just getting started, or anybody who wants to like figure out how to go in a certain direction.
Yep.
The ones who want to navigate the front end world. And we have a couple of really, really core concepts about how we're going to do this. And I think you're going to be surprised at how we're going to be able to help you out because we have seen a bunch of different people in a bunch of different shoes, wearing a bunch of different hats, and I think that we can definitely help you out, especially people who are absolute beginners. And the
Yep.
one other thing I want to mention is that, like, you know, I talk a lot of tech words and I say a lot of things that other people might not know. So I make a lot of assumptions. If I say something in now or any one of the meetups in the future that you don't know, please just tell me like, hey, what is that thing that you're talking about? And there's like no embarrassing stuff because like I
Ditto.
constantly ask that. Like I'm talking to some infrastructure guys and I'm like, wait, reverse proxy, just remind me what that is again. So, or like if you've never heard a word, just like let us know because
Yes.
I don't want to make any assumptions about anyone's knowledge. Everybody's going to be coming from all different walks of life and all different levels of training. So,
Yep.
or and some maybe you know whatever. So, will we cover UI and UX design? Yes.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
in so many in so we're not going to be focused on UX design and UI design, but we will cover it absolutely because I believe that everyone should be really aware of UX. And you know, when you go for interviews, you will get the job if not only you're a good JavaScript developer, but if you're like keen, if your eye is focused on pixel perfect design and that you know you have that eye for UX design, even if you're not like necessarily like the UX designer in the world, that like elevates you into a whole nother plane. And that's what interviewers really, really want is front end developers that have a keen eye for design. Now, look at me. You know, I need my wife to tell me if two clothes, you know, match, but I do have a really good eye for the UX part of it, the user experience part of it. I have a really good eye for what's pixel perfect and what's not. Colors that match. you know, the design part of it, the UI design part of it, um, the colors part of it is not really my bag, but I'm getting better at it. You know, the more you practice, the better you'll get.
Yeah, and to expand on that, it's just that I think UX design is actually a very critical skill for front-end developers to have, because oftentimes when we get comps from designers, we're actually not given like every single breakpoint. They haven't thought of every single scenario. So there will be times you have to make smart decisions, or at least bare minimum recommendations on what happens at certain responsive breakpoints and those things. So yeah, absolutely, we'll we'll definitely be covering those things.
Yeah. And so what was the most difficult project you worked on? Ben, what was the most difficult? Do you know what the most difficult project you worked on was?
Oh, I might need a second. You want to go first?
I could tell you definitely what was the most difficult project that I worked on. So you got difficult in many different like fashions here, right? So difficult could be like people, difficult could be coding, you know, difficult could be like a million different things. Coding wise, the most difficult thing that I worked on was a thing called My Case Builder. You should go look it up. My Case Builder is like basically a CAD designer that I wrote in JavaScript. It was the most, and I'm not like a math person at all. Now I am, because I wrote that program like now. And so what I actually did to get really good at the math that was needed for that is I called Harvard and I asked them for grad students, like math post-grad students. And I was like, I don't even know what the words for the things I need to do are. Like, tell me. And they were like, okay, so that right there is calculus. That is matrix math. And that is that. And I was like, great. Now I know the words. Okay, tell me how to do this using matrices and stuff like that. So sometimes it's just hard to know like what you need to know in the first place to get stuff done. Like there's a word in that one was constructive solid geometry. And I couldn't like, I was like, I want to cut shapes out of 3D. And finally someone was like, that's called constructive solid geometry. And I was like, great, now I can go find out what constructive solid geometry is and learn that. But yeah, that go look it up, mycasebuilder.com, and go play around with it. Originally, I wrote it in Flash in 2011, and then later rewrote the whole thing. It's like 90,000 lines of code. It's so cool. What's yours, Ben?
Yeah, mine unfortunately is not as interesting as yours. I did not call Harvard to talk to any math professors. I think the hardest project I've ever worked on was like a really big legacy code base. And so unfortunately I had inherited work from like people who had hired like cheap contractors who had just done all sorts of incorrect front end things. Like their CSS selectors had like 2 different IDs in them and they were like 6 selectors long. And unfortunately, I'm not exaggerating. So just having to untangle that and deal with all the bad decisions, I still have nightmares about that.
That's harder than like my thing is like I was in control of all the code. When you're not in control of all the code and a lot of it's written horribly, or someone just like left and they're like, here's your code.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But that's where you really test your skills. Like that's like the test of a good developer in general. Can you just like deep dive into this and figure out what they were going for, and can you fix it?
Yeah.
Oh man, so many of those. That's like,
oh man,
it's making me it's giving me a little bit of PTSD thinking about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Hopefully that answered your question. I'll try to come with a more interesting one in the future. But
no, that's like perfect. That's exactly it. So what will you cover? What CC3 is that? Do you mean CSS3 or is that?
That's what I read at first.
Yeah, maybe it's CSS3. DCowboy61. Maybe you can tell us what CC3. Maybe that's Creative Cloud 3, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's in Java, so it sounds a little more back-end off the top of my head. But if
we're not doing anything in Java.
Yeah, no Java.
But yeah, let us know what that is, and we can answer the question. I liked UX so much that's my main function now. So Arthur, you're now a UX designer right now. Is that true? That's super cool.
Where can you find the list? Okay, let me.
If you get the link to the Discord, I can paste it in the chat. You let me.
I tried. They don't let me paste hyperlinks in the chat.
Oh no! Oh! That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Wow.
You know what I'm gonna do? Okay, so if you guys go to the meetup page, I will post it there.
Yeah, so, post it in the meetup. We'll post it after this, or like right now in the meetup, and you guys can check it out. But we do have a meeting next week in person where we're going to talk about
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. Sorry, 2 weeks from now, where we're going to talk about navigating the front end and and the front end ecosystem, and we're going to talk about. Well, Ben can tell you what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so at a high level, to your points, like as far as like just for everyone who's sort of new or in the middle of it, just showing how vast the UX, sorry, not the UX, the front end ecosystem is these days, as far as the various specialties, and just giving people ideas as far as what they want to do. Because to Jacob's point, while it's important to be good at the core skills of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you will eventually come to find that you enjoy solving some problems more than others, right? Some people love debugging like the really small JavaScript stuff. Some people love building gorgeous animations. It's just one of those things to just kind of figure out. And then obviously there are people who are, accessibility warriors who can go in there and tell you how to make sure it's keyboard accessible and like for blind users. And it's pretty incredible that depth of knowledge that's required on that end. So it just really depends on what you're passionate about. We just want to help to expose that and then, help everyone to navigate that ecosystem.
Yeah. And so yeah, one thing that we're just going to talk about is trying to figure out like how you can navigate the huge amount of knowledge that you need to somehow magically acquire in order to become a front end developer. And it's funny, the back end developers that I talk to all the time, they're just like, yeah, we know Ruby and we know databases and stuff like that, but the fact that we know Vue and I know Angular and we know CSS and we know CSS for IE 6, 7, 8, 9, and we know all these different things is really, really interesting stuff. And then there's build tools on top of that.
Yeah.
And, there's Yarn and there's NPM and there's all these different things. And trying to navigate all that stuff is really interesting. So we're looking forward to talking to everyone coming up in a couple of weeks. So yeah.
All right, yeah, I think that's everything. Again, check the meetup page, meetup.com/frontend-league. And then I just posted the Discord link there. But yeah, again, I think, so you can reach out to me, Ben Codes Zen. I'm on Twitter and all the things. And I think, Jacob, you're Jake Codes on everything?
Jake Codes, JAKE.
I can post that in the channel. So
yeah.
So you can find us on Twitter. Again, reach out to us if you have any questions. But again, thanks again, everyone, for coming out. And we look forward to getting to know everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a good evening.
All right,
Bye.
take it easy. Bye.